So I watched Parasyte, and I gotta say it's a pretty good anime. It's not some visual spectacle where every frame could be a desktop wallpaper, but it's also not so terribly drawn or animated that it's hard to look at. Overall, it's a pretty middle-of-the-road, well-animated, well-made anime. The art style is good, not too flashy and not too crazy, though there was a random aspect of it that confused me. Sometimes, for what seemed like no reason, they would animate 3D models as background characters, and it just looks so weird. I wouldn't say bad or stupid, but just like, why not animate them in 2D? I just feel like, wouldn't that be easier? Or just draw them as background characters that were static. Other than that, I had no real gripes with the animation of the show. The plot of the show follows a high schooler who has a run-in with a parasite that burrows itself into his arm and basically gives him superpowers. That's basically the quick gist of the show, and there's other parasites that exist. These parasites are supposed to take over the human brain and, like, eat humans and stuff. uh, and you'd think a show like this would have like extreme overdone action, but that's actually one thing that surprised me. The action in the show is a lot more realistic, which is weird for a show that delves on alien parasites with basically superpowers. Yeah, I know that's a weird thing to say about a show where alien parasites take over people's bodies and allow them to morph into tentacle monsters that can change their molecular structure of their cells to literally become knives sharp enough to slice people in half and decapitate anyone in an instant, but it's actually realistic. In the sense that the main character doesn't immediately jump into every battle with every parasite, destroy 17 buildings in one punch, and slice a crack in the road and use the force. No, the fighting is pretty straightforward and it makes sense given the context of the universe it's set in. Fights aren't taken as a who can outpower more power sort of mentality, but are actually engaged in like how animals would fight. Both go for weak points, both assess possible strategies. Sometimes opponents have to gamble and sometimes opponents lose. And the main character isn't amazingly smart and able to come up with plans on the fly, and sometimes that subverted my expectations. Because in the final episode, Shinichi, the main character, is told about a trash pile that almost set ablaze to a whole mountain when it caught fire. And later on in the final fight, he's on top of the pile, and I thought, oh, he's gonna lead Goto, the guy he's fighting, onto the pile and light it up and use that burning to either kill him or attack him, which is strange because earlier in the episode, Shinichi is given a lighter that he uses to light a stick on fire and momentarily stun Goto. And multiple times in the anime, it's mentioned that a flamethrower might be a pretty good idea at stopping the parasites, but nope, he just stabs a stick into his side, and it happened to be the right stuff to lead to the final enemy's death. Also, another thing was the enemies weren't really given the development I thought they'd get. This show didn't fit into the whole one after another stronger and stronger opponents that I expected to happen. Sometimes opponents did get stronger, and sometimes he did take them out one by one, but it wasn't exactly it wasn't how I expected. I thought Tamara Reiko would be the final boss, some final challenge to the main character, but nope, nope, it's just some other parasite that likes killing. The enemies weren't really developed in the sense that they were made as foils for the main character either. The last main villain wasn't really some ideological counterpart to the hero, he was just some organism that wanted to fight. And Tamara Reiko was just some parasite that learned how pleasant life could be sometimes. It was very interesting. I wouldn't consider it a good or bad thing, because for some people I could see how this makes you kind of apathetic to the whole action sequences, or even the story itself, and I gotta say that's kinda how I felt. I didn't get some awesome anime power-up, last life on the line flashback sequence where the hero risks everything and throws everything they have at the bad guy who's trying their hardest. I just got a regular, sometimes think of something brawl. And it was fine. I wasn't left unsatisfied. I personally just wasn't invested as much as I was in other anime fights like One Punch Man or My Hero Academia. But it's not a bad thing for the story, because the whole point wasn't the action, but the messages of the story behind it. Man, does this story have a lot of messages. It comes at the idea of what humans would do if they were challenged on their position at the top of the food chain, and it's pretty obvious they'd resist. But it brings up the idea, if all life is precious, then how far does that go? Are humans ready to give up the comfort of their lives for another organism? Or hell, would they even be willing to think about the animals they slaughter? If another organism challenged humans' place at the top of the food chain, and they simply herded humans into certain places to be eaten as food, is that really any different from what humans do to livestock? If it's okay for us to do it, what makes it so bad about another organism doing it? If human life is precious, then who decides that? If all life on Earth is precious, who decides that? Is love for our fellow species, or even species that helps another species, truly altruism, or is it egocentrism? The show poses ideas from different angles on a multitude of issues concerning everything from environmentalism to the human condition. Is environmentalism really about the Earth? If that's the case, then why are things that are good for the Earth skewed in favor of humanity's continuing existence? If it were truly from the Earth, then it would be from a naturalistic point of view, but it's from the point of view as humans, by humans, with human metrics and human morals. Also, what are emotions? What are they there for? Are they the things that make us human? Why are we so irrational if we're capable of such rational thought? If humans are going to die one day anyway, and an enemy is coming to kill you while you're in a large crowd, why is it not okay to use the crowd as some sort of meat shield, like Migi offered as a solution? Is all life precious only when it pertains to saving your own life, or the lives around you, or human lives, or the lives of creatures you care about? The show questions a lot of this without ever giving a clear answer. It poses the problems and leaves you to decide. Humans could, all collectively, accomplish great things, and we do, but humans, all collectively, accomplish horrible things as well. The Parasites accuse humans of being closer to demons than them, and I think it does a pretty good job of showing that humans can be demons or angels, depending on how you look at it. To livestock, we're just monsters that feed on them. To the dogs we raise, we're like gods. And it also asks the question of what is even the point of being here? The show's focus on Migi and Shinichi and the changes they go through is pretty interesting. Migi is an unfeeling parasite, at least from the beginning. Shinichi is a nervous wreck of a human being and changes over time. His caring, emotional self is sometimes blockaded by the mix of Migi inside of him. And even though the show never outright says it, the slight changes to Migi showing him as a bit more emotional throughout the show are a nice touch to show how the slow bonding with Shinichi has changed Migi to be more human. This show overall is a pretty good anime. The pacing isn't bad, and the characters, especially the main ones, get enough coverage and understandable arcs that it's easy to follow and feel bad for them. Except Kana. Her death was completely avoidable, and she should have just listened to Shinichi when he said for the millionth time not to go to the signal of the goddamn... And it flows pretty alright, I would say. Sometimes, though, scenes would just end, which I thought was funny at times, but they would never linger on a moment for too long, so nothing ever got dragged out more than it needed to be. Sometimes things just happen, and then we were on to the next scene, so it was hard to get bored when it just constantly flowed. The soundtrack definitely could have been more memorable, but the least I could say for the accompanying background music is that it just gets the job done. They reuse the same tracks for similar effects, but I'm not really sure it makes me remember any of them. And I definitely wouldn't give the soundtrack a high rating in terms of something that's memorable or amazing. The fighting music is fast and action-packed, the sad music is slow and, well, sad. The other music just does its job, and that's about it. Nothing really to say more than that. It just, the tones that the music goes for, it just kind of goes for, and that's about it. Like, whether it's kind of a hit or miss depending on how you personally enjoy your music. For me, it was just kind of middle of the road. It just exists, and it wasn't the worst thing ever, but it definitely wasn't the best. For a 24 episode series, the premise and execution are pretty well done. The human condition and other philosophical questions about life are explored in an interesting and what I would argue a meaningful way. Even if someone doesn't take a lot away from the show, I feel like there's always something everyone could take away from it. It's pretty good. I'd recommend it.